Rahim wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished fixing the leaky faucet in the small apartment he shared with his son, Omar. The apartment was modest, with only 2 bedrooms, but it had been enough for them so far. Rahim had been a single father for 3 years after his wife passed away. He worked long hours at a local hardware store, and every penny he earned went to keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table. Lately, money had been tighter than usual. Rent was due next week, and Rahim realized that the extra bedroom was empty. He had thought about renting it out, but he worried about strangers. Still, he had to try something. Maybe a kind person would want a place to stay. It was late evening, and the rain poured down in heavy sheets. Rahim heard a soft knock at the door. He frowned. Visitors were rare, and at this hour, it was unusual. He opened the door cautiously. A young girl stood there, drenched from head to toe. Her hair stuck to her face, and her clothes were soaked and muddy. Her small hands clutched a thin backpack, and her eyes were red from crying. She looked no older than 17, maybe 18. I have nowhere to go, she said quietly, her voice shaking. Can I stay here, please? Rahim studied her for a moment. There was fear in her eyes, but also something that made him pause. She seemed fragile, but there was a quiet strength in the way she stood, even soaked and shivering. Rahim glanced over his shoulder at Omar, who had appeared from the living room, holding his favorite toy car. The boy looked curious but silent. Rahim smiled gently at him and then turned back to the girl. All right, he said. You can stay for now. Come inside and dry off. The girl's face lit up with relief, and she nodded quickly. Thank you so much. Inside, Rahim handed her a towel. She wrapped it around herself and sat down quietly on a chair. Rahim went to the kitchen and boiled some water for tea while Omar watched her with wide eyes. What's your name? Rahim asked gently as he returned. Hannah, she said softly. Omar, this is Hannah, Rahim said. Omar waved shyly. Hannah gave a small smile in return. Dinner was simple that night: rice, vegetables, and some chicken Rahim had managed to buy. Hannah ate quietly, careful not to make a mess. Rahim noticed she didn't complain about the simple food. She seemed grateful for even the smallest things. After dinner, Hannah went to her new room. She pulled out a small notebook from her backpack and began writing. Rahim thought about asking her questions, but he decided to wait. Hannah had clearly been through something difficult. Some people needed time to open up. Omar, however, was curious. Will she stay forever? He asked, looking up at his father. Rahim shook his head, smiling softly. We don't know yet. But for now, she has a safe place. That night, Rahim couldn't sleep easily. He kept thinking about Hannah and how she had arrived so suddenly in their lives. There was something unusual about her, something that didn't quite fit the image of a homeless girl. She was polite, careful, and intelligent, even in small ways like how she handled her bowl at dinner or how she folded her towel after drying her hair. The rain continued to fall outside, tapping gently against the windows. Rahim finally lay down, listening to Omar's soft breathing in the next room. He wondered what Hannah's story was and hoped that, whatever had brought her here, she would be safe and find comfort in their home. Hannah, meanwhile, sat quietly on the edge of her bed, looking at the notebook in her hands. Her eyes were still red from crying, but there was a spark of determination there too. She had run away from a life that felt too heavy, too suffocating. She didn't want sympathy, and she didn't want anyone to know who she really was. But for the first time in days, she felt something close to peace. In that small apartment, under the sound of the pouring rain, Rahim, Omar, and Hannah began the first chapter of a story none of them could have predicted. The next morning, Hannah woke to the smell of warm bread and tea coming from the kitchen. She quietly got up, careful not to wake Omar, who was still sleeping. The apartment was small but neat, with sunlight streaming through the windows. For the first time in days, Hannah felt a sense of calm she had not known in a long time. Rahim was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. When he saw Hannah standing there, he smiled. "Good morning, Hannah. Sleep well?" Hannah nodded, her long hair still damp from yesterday's rain. "Yes, thank you." Her voice was soft but polite. Rahim noticed that she always spoke with respect, never complaining or asking for more than what was offered. Breakfast was simple: toast, eggs, and tea. Hannah ate quietly, keeping her gaze low. Omar, on the other hand, was energetic as ever. He ran around the table, talking about his school and the game he had played yesterday. Hannah listened with a faint smile, trying to follow his fast chatter. After breakfast, Rahim suggested Hannah help tidy up the apartment a little. Hannah agreed without hesitation. She washed the dishes, wiped the counters, and even helped Omar clean his small room. Rahim watched her work and felt a growing admiration. She was careful and precise, never rushing, and always making sure everything was in order. As the day passed, Hannah began to show small sides of her personality. She had a gentle sense of humor that made Omar laugh, and she seemed to have a natural way of teaching him new things. At one point, she helped him with a math problem he had been struggling with, explaining it clearly and patiently. Omar's eyes lit up with understanding, and Rahim quietly watched from the doorway. "Thank you, Hannah," Rahim said later when Omar went outside to play. "You really helped him." Hannah shrugged slightly but smiled. "I like helping. It feels nice." Her words were simple, but Rahim felt a quiet honesty in them. She was not pretending, not asking for praise. She simply wanted to contribute. In the afternoon, Hannah went for a short walk around the neighborhood. Rahim had encouraged her to explore a little, saying it was important to feel comfortable in her surroundings. Hannah noticed small shops, children playing in the streets, and neighbors greeting each other. It was different from the life she had run away from: calm, ordinary, and free. When she returned, Rahim had prepared a small snack. They sat together in the living room, Omar building a tower of blocks on the carpet. Hannah watched him, amused by his determination to make the tower taller than her. Rahim noticed the gentle way she interacted with Omar. She was patient, kind, and careful not to hurt him in any way. It reminded him of how children could sense the goodness in people. As evening approached, Rahim prepared dinner while Hannah set the table. The apartment smelled of spices and cooked vegetables. Hannah's movements were careful and precise, showing a sense of responsibility beyond her age. Rahim could not help but wonder what circumstances had made her so cautious and independent. After dinner, they sat together talking. Hannah rarely spoke about her past, but she listened carefully to Rahim and Omar. She asked small questions about their lives, their routines, and their dreams. Rahim found himself opening up more than he expected, telling her about his work, his challenges, and his hopes for Omar. Omar, of course, was full of questions for Hannah. "Do you have brothers and sisters?" he asked. Hannah shook her head. "No, just me," she replied. But I have friends. They are like my family sometimes. Her eyes softened as she spoke. Rahim noticed a hint of sadness, but she quickly smiled and changed the subject. That night, as Hannah lay in her small room, she felt a warmth she had not felt in a long time. For the first time since leaving her home, she felt safe. She could trust Rahim and Omar, and that was a comforting thought. She pulled out her notebook and wrote a few lines about the day, about the small kindnesses and the laughter she had shared with Omar. Rahim, meanwhile, sat on his couch, listening to the quiet apartment. He thought about Hannah and how unexpectedly she had become a part of their lives. He didn't know what her story was, and he didn't need to know yet. For now, she was here, safe and cared for, and that was enough. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and shiny. Inside the small apartment, a fragile but growing bond had formed. Rahim, Omar, and Hannah had begun to share something simple but meaningful, a sense of home, of trust, and of new beginnings. Days turned into weeks, and Hannah began to feel more at home in Rahim's apartment. She followed simple routines, helping with chores, preparing meals, and spending time with Omar after school. The apartment, once quiet and lonely, now felt full of life. Rahim noticed how naturally Hannah had settled in, and Omar had grown attached to her presence. Omar loved having Hannah around. He asked her to teach him new games, and she happily joined him, laughing at his small victories and consoling him when his tower of blocks fell. Hannah's laughter was gentle, like sunlight through a window, and Rahim realized that her presence brought joy to their home in a way he had not expected. One afternoon, Rahim came home from work feeling tired. He found Hannah sitting on the sofa, reading aloud to Omar from a storybook. Her voice was soft but expressive, painting images of the characters in Omar's mind. Rahim paused at the door, quietly watching the scene. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. Hannah was not just a guest, she was becoming a part of their little family. When the story ended, Omar hugged Hannah tightly. "I like when you read to me," he said sincerely. Hannah smiled, ruffling his hair gently. "I like it too," she said. "It's fun to share stories with you." Rahim cleared his throat, and both children looked at him. "Hannah, would you like to have dinner with us?" "I made something special today," he asked. Hannah nodded, her cheeks warming slightly. They ate together, talking about small things: Omar's day at school, Hannah's favorite books, and Rahim's work. The conversation was light, but it was filled with connection. Over the next few days, Rahim noticed small changes in Hannah. She seemed less guarded and more willing to talk about herself, though only in small ways. She told them about her favorite hobbies: drawing, reading, and spending time outdoors. She never mentioned her family or her past in detail, but Rahim could sense that she had faced challenges that made her careful and thoughtful. One evening, as the three of them were cleaning the apartment together, Omar asked a question that surprised Rahim. "Hannah, why do you like being here with us?" Hannah paused, thinking carefully before answering. "Because you treat me like a person, not like someone who needs help. You care without asking for anything in return." Her words were simple, but Rahim felt their depth. He realized that Hannah had experienced a world where people often judged or used her, and here she had found trust and kindness. The bond between them grew quietly but steadily. Rahim found himself looking forward to Hannah's company, not just for Omar's sake, but because she brought a calm and gentle presence into the apartment. Hannah, in turn, began to trust Rahim more, sharing small stories and jokes with him that she had kept to herself before. She began to understand that not all adults were harsh or selfish, some genuinely cared for others without expecting anything back. One weekend, Rahim took Omar and Hannah to a small park nearby. They played on the swings, fed the birds, and shared a picnic under a large tree. Hannah laughed freely, a sound Rahim had not heard from her before, and Omar giggled at every little joke she made. Rahim watched them both and felt a deep sense of contentment. For Hannah, it was a rare feeling of freedom and belonging. For Rahim, it was a reminder that family could be chosen, not just born. Back at the apartment that evening, Hannah stayed up a little longer, writing in her notebook. She reflected on the day, the warmth she felt, and the unexpected friendship that had blossomed. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope that life could be simple, safe, and kind. Rahim, meanwhile, sat quietly on the couch, thinking about Hannah. He had opened his home out of necessity, but he realized that her presence had changed him. He was more patient, more thoughtful, and more aware of the small joys in life. Hannah had come to them by chance, but now she was an essential part of their lives. As night fell, the apartment was peaceful. Omar slept soundly, Hannah lay in her room with a small smile on her face, and Rahim listened to the quiet hum of the city outside. In that calm, a bond had formed, unspoken, yet strong. A bond built on trust, kindness, and the simple act of sharing life together. For Rahim, Omar, and Hannah, life had begun to feel different. A sense of belonging, hope, and friendship had entered their small world, marking the start of something meaningful and enduring. Weeks passed, and Hannah began to feel more comfortable in Rahim's apartment. She had settled into small routines, helping with chores, spending time with Omar, and quietly keeping up with her studies. The apartment had become more than just a shelter, it was a place where she could feel safe and accepted. Rahim noticed subtle changes in Hannah. She smiled more often and even teased Omar gently during their games. At the same time, there were moments when she seemed distant, her eyes clouded with thought. Rahim assumed it was normal. People who had experienced hardship often carried memories that took time to heal. He did not press her for answers. One afternoon, while Hannah was cleaning the living room, Rahim found a small envelope tucked between the cushions of the sofa. He picked it up, curious, and saw that it had no name or address. Inside were neatly folded papers, filled with numbers and letters that made little sense to him. Hannah walked into the room and noticed Rahim holding the envelope. "That's mine," she said quietly, her voice calm but firm. She walked over and took it from him. Rahim raised an eyebrow. "Is everything okay?" he asked gently. Hannah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, it's just personal. Important." She walked away without giving more details. Rahim placed the envelope down but couldn't help feeling curious. There was something unusual about Hannah. She was polite and humble, yet she moved with confidence, handled tasks with precision, and carried herself with a maturity beyond her years. It did not match the story she had given him about being homeless. Still, he reminded himself not to judge. She had chosen to stay with them, and that trust was more important than questions. That evening, Hannah received a phone call. She excused herself quietly and stepped outside to answer it. Rahim watched her from the doorway, noticing the serious expression that crossed her face. She spoke softly, with careful words, nodding and occasionally pausing. When she returned, she looked calmer, but Rahim could sense the tension that lingered. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Hannah smiled faintly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes, It's fine. Just some arrangements I need to handle, she said. Rahim accepted her answer. Hannah was private, and he had promised himself not to intrude. Omar, curious as always, asked, "Hannah, are you waiting for someone?" Hannah shook her head. "No, just some errands," she said with a small smile. Omar seemed satisfied and ran off to play. Rahim could not shake the feeling that Hannah's life had layers he did not yet understand. Over the next few days, Rahim observed small hints of Hannah's mysterious past. She spoke knowledgeably about art, finance, and social events, always with discretion. She wore clothes that were simple yet elegant, carrying herself with grace even in the most ordinary moments. Rahim began to wonder if her story of being homeless was only part of the truth. Hannah, meanwhile, continued to open up in small ways. She laughed more freely, shared stories about books she had read, and even helped Rahim organize some of the apartment's paperwork. Yet, when the conversation turned to family or her life before arriving, she remained quiet, her eyes distant. One afternoon, Hannah sat with Omar at the window, drawing pictures of the city streets below. Rahim noticed the peaceful expression on her face and felt a sense of relief. Whatever secrets she held, she was safe here, and that was what mattered most. Hannah looked at the sketches she had made and smiled softly. "It's nice to have a place where I can just be," she whispered. Rahim realized that Hannah was learning to trust them slowly. She had come into their lives with pain and fear, yet she was beginning to find comfort and friendship. Their home, small as it was, had become a space of understanding and care. As night fell, Rahim sat in the living room, listening to Hannah and Omar laughing quietly in the other room. He thought about the layers of mystery that surrounded Hannah, and though questions remained, he knew one thing for certain: she had brought warmth and light into their lives. Whatever her past held, Rahim was determined to protect her and ensure that she felt safe. Outside, the city lights flickered in the evening mist. Inside, Rahim, Omar, and Hannah had begun to create a life built on trust, kindness, and quiet understanding. Hannah's secrets might unfold one day, but for now, their little apartment was a place where hope could grow. It was a bright morning when Hannah left the apartment, carrying a small bag and walking with purpose. Rahim watched her from the doorway, curious but careful not to ask too many questions. Hannah had begun going out more frequently over the past weeks, running errands and exploring the neighborhood. She always returned with small smiles and a calm air, but today something felt different. A sleek black car pulled up in front of the apartment building. Hannah looked at it with a mixture of surprise and hesitation. Before Rahim could react, the car door opened, and a man in a sharp suit stepped out. He called her by name. "Hannah Ali," he said politely but firmly. "Your father will be relieved to know you are safe." Hannah froze for a moment, then nodded. She spoke quietly to the man, explaining something in short, careful sentences. Rahim could only watch from the doorway, his curiosity growing stronger. He realized that Hannah's life was far more complicated than he had imagined. She was not just a young girl trying to survive, there was a world behind her, one of influence and importance. The man smiled kindly at Hannah, then looked around, noticing Rahim standing nearby. "You must be the person who has been taking care of her," he said. Rahim nodded, still unsure what to say. "Yes, I've been helping her while she stayed here," he replied. Hannah looked at Rahim, her eyes softening. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. Rahim smiled gently. "You're welcome. You're like family now, Hannah. Take care of yourself." The man helped Hannah into the car, and she glanced back once at the apartment. Rahim felt a strange mix of emotions: curiosity, surprise, and a bit of sadness. Hannah had become a part of their small family, and now he realized there was another life waiting for her, one that was far beyond anything he could provide. Later that day, Hannah returned briefly to collect some belongings. She was dressed neatly, carrying a small briefcase, and her presence seemed more confident than before. Rahim could not help but notice the grace with which she moved, and it struck him how different she seemed from the shy, scared girl who had first knocked on his door weeks ago. Hannah sat with Rahim and Omar for a few minutes, sharing small smiles and quiet conversation. She did not go into detail about her family or her past, but Rahim could sense the unspoken story. She had chosen to stay here because she felt safe, because she had found trust in their small apartment. "Omar will miss you," Rahim said gently, looking at Hannah. Hannah knelt down to Omar's level and smiled. "I will miss you too," she said. Omar hugged her tightly. "Come visit soon," he said. Hannah nodded, ruffling his hair gently. After Hannah left, Rahim and Omar sat in the living room quietly. Rahim felt a mixture of pride and wonder. Hannah had carried herself with courage and humility, and yet he knew there was so much he did not understand. She had come into their lives quietly, almost unexpectedly, and had left a lasting impact. That evening, Rahim thought about the past weeks. Hannah had brought warmth, laughter, and a sense of calm into their small apartment. She had become a friend, a helper, and a presence that Omar adored. Yet, the twist in her story reminded him that life was often more complex than it seemed. People had histories, families, and challenges that were hidden from view. Rahim realized that he had learned something important from Hannah. It was not only about helping others but about trusting, caring, and allowing connections to grow naturally. Hannah had taught him patience, understanding, and the quiet power of kindness. Omar, meanwhile, asked questions about Hannah constantly. "Will she come back?" he asked, worried. Rahim smiled and nodded. "Yes, she will. She's just going to take care of something important, and then she'll visit us again." Omar's eyes lit up, and he seemed reassured. As night fell, Rahim sat by the window, watching the city lights. Hannah's presence, though temporarily gone, lingered in their home. The apartment felt warmer, filled with the memories of laughter, small talks, and quiet moments of trust. Rahim understood that life could bring unexpected surprises, and sometimes those surprises changed everything in a quiet, meaningful way. Hannah's secret had been revealed in part, but her choice to stay with them had shown Rahim and Omar the true power of kindness and friendship. Their small family had grown, not by blood, but by trust, care, and shared experiences. And in that moment, Rahim knew that whatever the future held, Hannah would always have a place in their hearts. After the encounter with the sleek black car, Hannah returned to Rahim's apartment with a quiet determination. She had resolved to maintain her independence while also keeping the connection she had built with Rahim and Omar. The past few weeks had shown her what it felt like to be trusted and cared for without judgment, and she did not want to lose that. Hannah's return brought a renewed energy to the apartment. She helped Rahim with small household tasks, preparing meals, and organizing things with her careful, methodical touch. Omar ran around excitedly, eager to show Hannah the little drawings he had made, and she knelt to admire them, encouraging him with kind words. Her patience and gentle attitude seemed to calm the small household, making it a place of warmth and comfort. Rahim noticed that Hannah had grown more confident. She spoke more freely, asking questions about his work, his routines, and even small details about the city they lived in. Rahim found himself enjoying these conversations, noticing that Hannah's intelligence and maturity were far beyond her years. At the same time, she never boasted or sought attention, quietly demonstrating her capability and care. One evening, Rahim returned home later than usual. He was surprised to find Hannah and Omar already at the table, working on a small puzzle together. The sight brought a smile to his face. Omar looked up and waved eagerly, and Hannah greeted him with her calm, polite voice. "Hello, Rahim. How was your day?" she asked. Rahim felt a warmth spread through him. "Busy, but seeing you two working together makes it better," he said. Hannah smiled softly, her eyes reflecting a mixture of kindness and quiet understanding. She had a way of making the apartment feel like a home rather than just a temporary shelter. Over the next few days, the bond between Rahim and Hannah deepened. She began sharing more about herself, though always in small, careful doses. She talked about her love for reading and drawing, and how she enjoyed simple activities like walking in the park or feeding birds. Rahim noticed how easily she connected with Omar, teaching him new games and patiently helping him understand small tasks. One afternoon, as the three of them were arranging books on the shelf, Omar asked Hannah a question. "Hannah, do you like living here?" Hannah paused, considering her answer carefully. Then she looked at both Rahim and Omar and said, "Yes. Here, I can be myself. I feel safe, and I feel cared for. That is important to me." Rahim felt a lump in his throat. These simple words held more meaning than any elaborate explanation. Hannah's trust in Rahim grew slowly but steadily. She confided small worries, like feeling nervous about her schoolwork or wondering if Omar was enjoying a game too much. Rahim listened patiently, offering guidance without criticism. This mutual respect created a quiet understanding that strengthened their connection. Hannah was learning that not all adults demanded something in return for their care, and Rahim was learning to trust a young person's judgment and honesty. On weekends, Rahim would take Hannah and Omar to nearby parks or libraries. Hannah thrived in these small adventures, laughing freely and enjoying the simplicity of normal life. She began keeping a small journal, noting moments that made her happy or things she learned. Rahim admired this discipline, realizing that Hannah had grown stronger through her past hardships, yet she had not lost her humility or kindness. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Hannah spoke softly. "Thank you for letting me stay here. You didn't have to, but you did. You trusted me even when you didn't know me." Rahim looked at her with gentle eyes. "You stayed because you wanted to. You trusted us too. That is what matters." Omar, tired but happy, leaned against Hannah, his small hand in hers. Rahim felt a quiet joy as he looked at the scene. Their bond was more than just friendship, it had become like family, built on trust, care, and shared experiences. Hannah had learned to open her heart again, and Rahim had learned to welcome someone new into his life without hesitation. That night, Hannah lay in her room, thinking about the past weeks. She felt a deep sense of peace and belonging, a rare feeling she had not experienced before. Rahim and Omar had become more than friends, they had become a family she could trust. And Rahim, watching her from the living room, felt the same way. In their small apartment, trust had blossomed into friendship, and friendship had blossomed into something meaningful and lasting. Hannah had found a safe place, Rahim had found a friend, and Omar had found someone who cared for him deeply. Together, they were creating a life filled with warmth, understanding, and hope for the future. The days passed quietly, but Hannah's life had changed in a way she could hardly have imagined. She had reconciled with her family in her own way, meeting her father and explaining why she had left. He listened patiently, finally understanding that Hannah needed her independence and space to grow. Yet, despite this connection, Hannah chose to remain living with Rahim and Omar, because she had found something priceless in their small apartment: trust, friendship, and a sense of belonging. Rahim noticed the subtle change in Hannah. She seemed more relaxed, her laughter coming more freely and naturally. Omar, of course, was thrilled. He ran to greet her every morning, showing her his small creations and telling stories from school. Hannah listened patiently, encouraged him with gentle words, and even joined in his games. The apartment had become a lively, happy place, full of warmth and companionship. One morning, Rahim prepared a small breakfast for Hannah and Omar. The three of them sat together, enjoying the meal and chatting about their plans for the day. Hannah shared her ideas for a small art project she wanted to start at a nearby community center, while Omar proudly showed her the drawings he had made. Rahim smiled, seeing how naturally Hannah had become part of their daily life. "You've changed our home, Hannah," Rahim said quietly as he poured tea into their cups. Hannah looked up, surprised by his words. I only tried to be helpful," she replied softly. Rahim shook his head. "It's more than that. You've brought happiness, laughter, and trust. Omar and I feel safer and more cared for because of you." Hannah's eyes softened, and a small smile appeared on her face. In the afternoon, Hannah went to the community center she had mentioned. She worked with other young people, helping them with drawing and reading activities. She felt fulfilled, knowing that her experiences could help others. Rahim had encouraged her to follow her passions while still staying close to home, and Hannah was beginning to see that she could balance both worlds: the one she had chosen and the one she had left behind. When she returned home, she found Omar waiting by the door, bouncing excitedly. "Hannah, look what I made," he said, holding up a small paper sculpture. Hannah crouched down and examined it carefully. "This is amazing, Omar," she said sincerely. "You have a great imagination." Omar beamed, and Rahim watched the interaction with quiet pride. Hannah's patience and kindness had made Omar more confident, and he looked up to her as a sister and friend. That evening, the three of them sat on the small balcony, watching the sun set over the city. Hannah reflected on the past weeks: the fear, the loneliness, the uncertainty. And now, she felt peace. She had found a home where she was accepted for who she was, where her past did not define her, and where she could grow without pressure. Rahim looked at Hannah and smiled. "I'm glad you stayed," he said simply. Hannah returned the smile. "I'm glad I stayed too. I finally feel like I belong somewhere." Omar leaned against her, and Rahim placed a hand on both of their shoulders. In that quiet moment, they shared a sense of connection that could not be broken by circumstance or distance. Hannah's life was no longer defined by fear or secrecy. She had found balance between her family and the small family she had chosen. Rahim had found a friend who reminded him of the strength of kindness, and Omar had found someone who truly cared for him. Together, they were a family, built not by blood, but by trust, love, and shared experiences. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Rahim, Hannah, and Omar sat quietly, enjoying the peace and warmth of their home. They knew that life would continue to have challenges, but they also knew that they had each other. Hannah had found her place in the world, Rahim had found hope and companionship, and Omar had found someone to guide him with gentle care. In that small apartment, a new chapter had begun, one filled with laughter, trust, and the quiet, unshakable bond of a family that had chosen to stay together. Hannah had come into their lives as a stranger, but she had left an imprint on their hearts that would never fade. And together, they looked forward to every day, knowing that their home was more than walls and furniture. It was a place where hope, love, and friendship would always grow.